Part 3, Chapter 1. Cutter was an only, like me. He was born in a little town called Pictou on the Northumberland Strait that separates Nova Scotia from Prince Edward Island. His parents ran the snack bar on the ferry that worked the crossing between the nearby Caribou and Wood Islands, PEI. Cutter's school record showed a monotonous string of A's from grade 1 through high school, with neat handwritten comments that praised his high marks and pointed out that he was a loner and seemed to be withdrawn at times. Except for the grades, I could have been reading about myself. He got into the University of Toronto on a full scholarship and proceeded to knock off top marks and prizes in electrical engineering. Somewhere along the line, he became a pacifist. He didn't believe war was noble or heroic. He thought it was insane. From Cutter's Diary, Volume 1. At the Somme in the First World War, a 5-month battle costing 415,000 lives on the British side alone gained 45 square miles of empty ground. 45! That's 9,000 dead for each square mile. How bad does it have to get before someone says, hey, wait a minute, this isn't worth it? During the last 2 years of the Second World War, over 1 million people were being killed each month. Who could say with a straight face that the generals who directed such lunacy were in their right minds? If individual human beings acted the way nations or tribes at war behave, they'd be locked away as dangerous offenders. In his first year of university, he caught the computer game bug, and by the middle of his second year, he was already designing his own games and thinking about signing up for the Armed Forces Reserves, which seemed like a strange interest for a pacifist, electronics genius with a bright future, promising great jobs and lots of money. His mom and dad were against it. Too dangerous, they said, in the letters that Cutter had kept. You could get killed, Bruce, and then what would we do? His parents were driving home from the Caribou Ferry wharf one night when a drunk driver wandered across the solid line, turning their pickup truck into scrap metal and making Cutter an orphan. He began his diary when he signed up and became a weekend soldier. It described his infantry training on weekends and holidays and his hope that someday he'd become a peacekeeper with the United Nations. He got top scores in marksmanship, but had no intention of firing his weapon at another human being. Fighting for peace, he wrote, is like shouting for silence. I'm going to do mutwa, military operations other than war. A pacifist in the army, typical Cutter. In 1993, he heard that Canada planned to send forces to the Balkans as part of UNPROFOR, the United Nations Protection Force, and he volunteered. Yugoslavia was tearing itself to pieces, and the UN was trying to keep people from each other's throats. From Cutter's Diary, Volume 1. Balkan history is Alice in Wonderland with guns and death squads. Off with their heads. Our training lectures weren't much help. Had to do some reading. Yugoslavia is about a quarter the size of Ontario. It used to be a country, but after 1990, it broke up into 6 nations that had formed it. A major problem was that the inhabitants of Yugoslavia didn't choose their homes according to lines on a map. There were Slovenians in Croatia, Croatians in Bosnia, and Serbians everywhere. Serbia is the strongest of the 6 and wants to dominate the rest for its own protection. When Croatia, which is smaller than New Brunswick, voted for separation, also for its own protection, the murderous war of Greater Serbia began to rip the place apart. Serbs and Croats speak dialects of the same language. In appearance, there's nothing to distinguish one from the other. Croats are Roman Catholic Christians. Serbs are Eastern Orthodox Christians. Croats write using Latin script. Serbs use Cyrillic writing, like the Russians. The two ethnic groups got along for years until the priests and politicians began to have their way and neighbor was turned against neighbor. Newspapers on each side accused the other of horrible crimes and screamed for revenge. Militias were formed. Drunks and criminals and fools were armed and sent on missions. What happened in Kievo tells it all. It's a village in Croatia inhabited by Croats, but situated in an area where the communities around it are mostly ethnic Serbian. One day, Kievo was attacked by Serbs and purified. The inhabitants were driven out or shot. The livestock was slaughtered and left to rot. The crops were burned. The wells were poisoned with dead animals or gasoline. The buildings were blown up and burned. Kievo is a hellhole where they made up the term ethnic cleansing. We got off the plane in Zagreb and formed up in the icy rain, hauled our gear into the white UN buses, settled in for a 3-hour drive to Sector West, where we'd be stationed. The city fell away behind. We pushed deeper and deeper into a blasted landscape, village after village of pulverized buildings, collapsed roof, bullet-pocket walls, standing beside piles of rubble. Churches smashed and desecrated, fields cratered and churned by artillery, animal carcasses, bloated and rotting, and fields nobody could farm because of the landmines. This is a war between villages. I don't understand it. A few years ago, these people worked side by side in factories, newspapers, offices. They bought seeds and fertilizer from one another. They played soccer together. They intermarried. What happened? Possible answers to be investigated if I make it home alive. Satan happened. Politicians and priests happened. History happened. God happened. Cutter's platoon set up camp in a deserted village and began fortifying the walls with bags of dirt. Their mission was to keep the main road open, disarm the combatants, destroy weapon dumps, protect the citizens, keep the peace. What peace? Cutter wrote. This place is a no man's land. Sniper fires, skirmishes, ambushes, murders, and retaliations. Ordinary people, and us, caught in the crossfire. But a lot of the time, Cutter was bored. He spent his downtime reading, keeping his diary up to date, playing soccer with local kids, maintaining his equipment. He honed his jump master's knife, whether it needed it or not, and oiled the leather scabbard. It had been made in Pictou, where he grew up. From Cutter's Diary, Volume 1. At a checkpoint on the main road, Randall Cloud and I were taking a break, sitting in the shade of our M113, playing chess on a miniature board. I was looking around, waiting for Randall to make up his mind, when I spotted a figure walking down the dirt road towards us. As he got closer, I noticed he was hobbling. Then the reason became clear. He was grasping at a crutch with both hands so that his upper body was turned to the side, making his progress slow and awkward. He was 10, maybe 12, but so skinny and malnourished he could have been 16. His t-shirt and shorts were ragged, the toes of his foot poked out of his shoe. He hitched right up to us and stood staring at the board, leaning on his crutch. His damaged leg had been sheared off below the knee, and the healed wound looked like melted plastic. In the distance, machine gun fire broke out. Nobody turned to look. By August, Cutter was only a couple months away from being sent home. He was looking forward to decent meals and peaceful university classrooms. Then his company was ordered to pack up and prepare to move out. The Croats were gearing up for a major offensive in the south. The Serbs had rearmed and reinforced in response. In a cleansed village called Temamir, Cutter's squad moved into another abandoned house, its walls gouged by bullets and blackened by smoke. The village's name meant, "Over there is peace." "Must be over there," Cutter scribbled. "Certainly isn't here." During a break on the second day, Cutter sat in the shade of the house studying his map. Sweat dripped from his forehead onto the plastic cover. The battlefront stretched roughly northeast-southwest. The Canadians, the only peacekeepers in the area, were near the Serb line, but between Temamir, the Serb headquarters, and Gospic, the Croat center of operations, the front ballooned like a weak spot in a blood vessel into Croat-held territory to the west. Inside this Temamir bulge were many ethnic Serb villages, and the Croats' objective was to capture the bulge and straighten out the front. Everyone knew what that meant for the villagers. There were rumors that Croats detained by UNPROFOR had been carrying satellite maps that could only have come from U.S. sources, that Germany was secretly supplying arms and even tanks to the Croat forces, and Russia was backing the Serbs. The big powers aren't fighting this war, Cutter wrote. They're catering it. From Cutter's Diary, Volume 2. When the attack came, I prayed, not for deliverance from death, not for my comrades in arms. I chanted, "Please, please, don't let me crap my pants." I was terrified that if they found me dead and stinking, they'd think I was a coward, or if I survived, the guys would laugh. It was 6:30 a.m., and I was squatting in the weeds behind the house, brushing my teeth out of a tin cup, when blam, the first mortar bomb exploded some distance away. The second blast knocked me sideways under a rainstorm of red dirt and rocks. The pounding went on all day. The noise and the smell and the shaking of the ground scraped my nerves raw. It was the Croats, we were told. They can't do that. I thought, we're the UN. Then I laughed. You fool, we're in the Balkans. The Croats pushed into the villages of the bulge and began looting, destroying, and killing. On September 9th, Cutter's squad moved into a field and dug in, close to the Croat line, which was hidden in the forest at the edge of the field. By placing themselves between the Serbs and Croats, the peacekeepers hoped to enforce a ceasefire. Then the Serb force drifted away. Cutter was checking his ammo when the lip of the berm at the edge of his trench seemed to explode and the rattled machine gun fire rolled over him. His helmet was whacked by a shell and snatched away as he ducked below ground. Up and down the Canadian line, fountains of dirt and mud sprang into the air. The peacekeepers were allowed to return fire if they were directly attacked. To his left and right, Cutter's mates opened up. Machine guns chattered, men yelled, calling out to each other, "Get them! Give it to him!" Cutter was in his first real firefight. Adrenaline buzzed through his veins. A hollowness stalked his bowels. His hands shook on his rifle. He had been trained to kill the enemy, but had never had any intention of doing it. "I'm a peacekeeper," he told himself, as the air around him bloomed with smoke and cordite and rang with gunfire. He sighted down his rifle barrel at the line of trees. Gun muzzles sparkled like camera flashes at a football game. Cutter fired into the trees, high above the flashes. "I won't shoot at them unless they come out of the trees," he told himself. At the same time, he was conscious of his comrades. Were they as scared as he was? By failing to fire at the muzzle flashes, as he had been trained to do, was he letting them down? He knew some who would be excited, bursting with dammed-up frustration. They had been aching for a chance to fight. The firefight raged through the night. Men scrambled to and fro around Cutter, delivering ammunition and water. He heard the screams of Croats who'd been hit. Torn by indecision, he found himself firing for effect one minute, shooting high the next, tears streaming down his face. When dawn came, the Croat line fell silent, and as the light rose, Cutter realized that they had melted away. During the night-long battle, no UN soldiers died, but almost 36 Croats were killed. Cutter was sick with guilt. As the peacekeepers moved into the Temimir Bulge and behind the retreating Croats, their mission changed again. First, they would distribute food, water, and blankets to the Serb civilians in the Bulge and gather them up so the UN could help them find somewhere else to live. Second, dead bodies were to be collected and transported to a temporary morgue for examination. Third, Cutter's platoon was ordered to help gather and record evidence of war crimes. RCMP officers had been brought from Canada to help. First assignment? Easy, Cutter scrawled. Second task? Hard. The Croats left almost no one alive. Cutter's platoon started to move through the valleys, collecting evidence of atrocities and war crimes. On one farm, they found a chicken coop still standing. Cutter wondered why it had not been destroyed along with the other buildings. He ducked into the low doorway, and in the dim light, made out the shadowy forms of two people sitting on chairs in the corner facing him. "Don't be afraid, I'm here to help you," he called out. When his eyes had adjusted to the dimness, he stepped near. Then he gasped and vomited onto the straw. Blackened skulls, hung with strips of burned flesh, grinned at him. The two women had been tied to the chairs and set on fire. Through the next week, hour by hour, Cutter's sanity slipped away. He found the corpse of an old woman lying in a field. She had been tortured and then shot in the head. On another farm, 7 uniformed Serbs had been executed, dragged into a barn, covered with straw, and doused with gasoline. The straw had been too damp to burn properly. Further on, an old man, his face a pulp of bloody flesh, had been shot 24 times. Bodies of men and women were found. They had been tortured by knife and fire, then shot in the head. And one warm autumn afternoon, when the sun lit up the red and gold oak forests on the mountains, Cutter and 3 other troops approached another small village. On the outskirts, someone called a halt, pointing to an area of freshly churned up ground. Cutter came upon a man's work boot lying on the ground and bent to pick it up. It was stuck in the dirt. He pulled harder, then realized the boot was still attached to a body. He called for the RCMP officer. "Dig," he told him. "Looks like a mass grave." They worked for hours but didn't find any more bodies, only a large number of bloody surgery gloves. The Croats had dug up a bunch of corpses and moved them to hide the evidence, the cop figured. Cutter, his stomach churning, folded his spade and turned away, glad to be finished with the job. Then he noticed something lying at his feet. It was a small shoe, the toe and one side stained with dried blood. He snatched it up and stuffed it inside his tunic, as if, in saving the shoe, he could bring the murdered kid back to life. The next morning, Cutter didn't respond to reveille. When spoken to, he showed no awareness. His eyes stared into a distance only he could see. He was flown back to Canada, declared unfit for duty, and ignored by the Department of National Defense for nearly 10 years. One day, after Cutter had fought his way closer to a normal life in spite of the voices in his head and messages beamed from Buffalo, a letter arrived. I realized that I had probably retrieved it from the locked mailbox on his porch for him. The letter invited regulars and reservists who had served in the 2nd Battalion of the Princess Patricia's Canadian Light Infantry in Croatia in September 1993 to a ceremony where the battalion would receive a Governor General's citation for courageous and professional execution of duty. The parade formation would be called the Temamir Guard. There was no reason given for the fact that Canada had pretty much ignored the achievements of Cutter and his mates for 9 years. The letter explained that Cutter would have to pay his own way to the ceremony. I wondered, sitting in his now brightly lit office, his blue bullet-creased peacekeeper's helmet on the desk beside the blood-stained shoe, if Cutter had decided to end his life even before the Department of Defense contacted him, or had the letter pushed him to the bedroom across the hall and the container of pills, or had he always, since coming home with his sanity in shreds, kept that option open, like a plane ticket, tucked in a drawer ready to be used when the time came. And where did I come in? I thought I understood now what he had wanted me to find out. Now you know, I saw him saying, a crooked smile on his thin lips. Why, I'm batty. He had traveled into the center of a terrible darkness. He had seen what nobody should ever have to see. And he had never really made it back.